Yeah, I think, what I'm seeing is a very basic view with the youth of, so for example, there would be a post saying ACAB, ACAB, as people say. And I pardon my French, but it means all cops are bastards. And that is just a narrative that I totally disagree with. And that is being pushed alongside, or I don't know if they mean it, or maybe they do. I'm not so sure. I should do my research before I say stuff. But, it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel right. And I had this great argument with this guy who I think he was from UAE. And he was talking about homosexuality and stuff like that, and he was a very confident individual. I love him to death, honestly. He's a very great guy. And we were saying, and he go, oh my God, ACAB, and I was saying, whoa, but it's like saying all black people steal. It's just a bad apple, right, of the bunch that becomes this whole thing. It can't be that, Of course, you and I've never stolen anything and felt great about it or out of necessity or anything like that. I always, if I took it and I've realized that I've taken it, then I always give it back. There are always times that people are like, "Oops, I accidentally stole it," and they give it back. But that's not the point, really. It's just a very broad and inappropriate term against police officers, and
it absolutely is, but I can understand where that comes from within certain people's experience. So more fitting might be all cops that particular person has dealt with in certain situations are bastards, but of course not all of them are. And I don't even think that's the issue. It's not really about stereotyping policemen. Is looking at institutional or systemic racism, as you say, in the state that is there, that gives the police certain powers to subjugate certain people. So you look at it from, so for example, recently in the UK, last couple of months, when some of the restrictions were lifted after the coronavirus, now of course they're being put back in place, but they were lifted a little bit, right? And so in true British tradition, people started having street parties. And, the Brits, they love a good party. But it was so noticeable that the police would shut down street parties in sort of Black and Asian areas and not the white areas. So, and then if you look at, the whole idea of like stop and search, Black men in London are 9 times more likely to get stopped and searched than white men. I did say Black and Asian men, to be honest. But so I can understand where that sentiment comes from. It's not enough to generalize it, but you have to look at it within the broader context of, living as minorities in countries, especially like the UK or the US, where the police have all of these powers. And recent events particularly have shown us that the police, some policemen abuse those powers. And there is nothing that there's no recourse for normal people. So I think that's more the issue.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with you. I see what you mean, definitely. And thank you for really opening up that door. I mean, I see in a new light. Thank you so much. And yeah, but one thing that I was thinking, because that was an argument that came up, I was thinking to myself, but then let's say, for example, there was a stereotypical, because you were mentioning, the white parties weren't shut down. I guess I'm assuming that was the case, and then colored parties were shut down. But there may or may not be a reason to that, and that's where I always try to be critical, even though I don't want to believe that it's because they're Black. I don't want to believe that, because that is just horrendous. It is absolutely ridiculous.
It's good. I mean, it's the reality, and it's good to start from there because you always know where you are. Excuse me. People, it's good to know what you're dealing with. I love the racists, right? The real hardcore racists, because I know what I'm dealing with. If you're going to use the N-word to me or say you're not getting this job because of who you are or your phenotype, rather than the people who kind of do it under the surface, or make excuses. And it's not, it is horrendous, but it's also the fact that we know what it is means that we can start to deal with it.
Right.
It's not underground racism. It's very blatant. I think that's always better to deal with.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, for example, let's say that there is a black man in England who is dressed very sharply, very well. And let's put him next to a white man or woman, it doesn't really matter, but most like men are more stopped than women's data, I guess. You know, a white man who is just not, he's wearing, you know, raggedy clothes or something like that. And if we switch those roles, what would happen? And I want to do that test in the future. You know, what would cops think? And if I were a police officer, right, and if I see that, I would think, both of them need to stop the party. If I mean, it's a little strange, but maybe the party was too rowdy, no masks, and people were, touching each other, talking really loud and stuff like that, right? So if that was the jurisdiction, the line that the police officer needs to understand, right? His orders were to stop or give a warning to parties that are very dangerous and health-wise. So if I was a police officer, here's what I would do. I would go to the white and the black part and say, hey, look, you guys are really close. You guys are touching each other. You need to stop because COVID is still there. You have to understand that. Please get back inside. That is, I think, would be a very fair treatment.
It would be, but sadly, it doesn't always happen like that. You know, and
yeah.
Especially in the UK, there's been a lot of COVID-related racial incidents. They're more like, the Black and Asian minorities are more likely to get the COVID fines. They're more likely to be stopped and reprimanded. And that test that you talk about, actually, I think something similar was done in New York. I can't remember when, but there's the thing about New York taxi drivers that don't want to stop for Black people, a bit like taxi drivers in Japan, right? They don't want to stop for Black people. There was that thing where the guy stood in a suit and he tried to hail a taxi, and the same thing, some raggedy sort of like druggy type white guy was able to get in a taxi, and so many of them stopped for him, not for this Black guy in a suit. So, we see it, and I'm not saying that it's excusable, but I don't. Rather than looking at the individuals, you have to look at the system. So, if there is a system in place where certain individuals are treated differently to others, then alarm bells are going to start ringing.
Right.
That's always the case. So, for example, even in Japan, when I used to go out to the clubs a long time ago and try and get taxis home, so many taxis would not stop for me. And I started to ask my white friends to stop taxis for me. And then I would hop in, and I had forgotten about this because I don't go out dancing anymore. But there was a night last year, I went out with some of the women from the Black Women in Japan group that I co-created, and got to a certain point in the evening, and two of us wanted to go home. I was driving because I wasn't drinking, and I like to get home. And I said to my friend, I'll take you to a taxi because, it's 1 a.m. and I want to make sure you're okay. And she's this very petite Jamaican woman, I don't know, 5'2" or something, really small. And we were standing in Sakai trying to flag down this taxi, and they would slow down and then they would drive off. And I was just like, oh my God, I'd forgotten about this. And she was like, yeah, they always do that. They always do that. And so then finally I just said, okay, let's go into a bar and get one of the guys in there to come and try and get you a taxi. And we had been in this bar previously with some friends. One of the people that we met happened to be this white guy from Australia who was like 5'11", he had a beard. I mean, he didn't look scruffy or anything, but kind of a big, imposing guy, very nice guy. And he came down, we told him what had happened, and he, of course, was outraged. He was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. He goes downstairs, less than 5 minutes, he stopped a taxi. We've been trying to stop a taxi for 30 minutes. So to me, you know, that is, I don't know, there was some sort of fear towards the two Black women. Right. I don't think particularly scary, but I've kind of heard that a lot. And so I can't in that situation say, well, maybe the taxi driver didn't see me, or, you know, maybe, I don't know what you'd say. But, you know, that's it. That's that when there's that sort of pattern of behavior, it's to do with the systems. It's not really to do with, you know, individuals. It's a pattern of behavior, and it's usually systemic racism.